Hey, how's it going, guys? And welcome to another episode of The Rotation. We're missing one of our usual suspects today, but it is me, Kingdom, and I'm joined by Icon Nation, no stranger to The Rotation. We unfortunately are without Ashley, aka Midnight, today. She actually, it seems like, might have came down with the land flu, and it happens. You got to only dap people up. Don't shake hands. Like that's the recipe. But I heard that the passion pit was a little crazy, and I'm sure she got in there to check that out. So it probably was bananas. Lots to talk about today, Icon. I mean, what a weekend! Uh, a lot of surprises, a lot of upsets. I think they said 0.01%. Only 8 people in the entire world got it right that Lag was going to win the grand finals.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I doubt anybody actually had them dropping into losers and then going all the way to winners, since Slasher is the only person who's done that twice, and he was on the first team that did it, and this is only the second time that's happened. And so I think it's amazing. And I kind of wanted to get your overall thoughts on the event, just the overall experience as a viewer of this weekend in Minnesota.
Yeah, I guess my first takeaway is that kind of the overall venue kind of gave me throwback vibes to when it was old MLG, right? Being in a ballroom and having the projectors. I know that it was a struggle for Minnesota to find a venue, but for me, it just gave me that feel of what it was like in 2014 and 2015 and 2016 of going to those events and walking in a ballroom and just having these massive screens and
Right.
this whole show being put on for you. So that was the vibe that it gave me. And we haven't really had that vibe lately because like most of these tournaments have been at that esports stadium in Arlington, and it has a little bit of a different feel to it. And each team has their individual rooms and all that. So for me, I thought it was kind of cool. It just gave me a throwback vibe. I guess my second biggest takeaway it was interesting to hear when RØKKR played OpTic, and I was talking with our producers a little bit before we started here that when the chants, I mean the chant that we hear so often is "Let's go OpTic," right? And it was weird to hear, like, you would almost start to hear that chant happen, and then it would get drowned out by "Let's go RØKKR." And that's something that
Wow.
we haven't really experienced before, right? It's like basically whether it was
Yeah.
in the old days where it was MLG Columbus or Anaheim or Miami or wherever they were at, it was you would always hear "Let's go OpTic." So to hear that chant start and then to hear it get drowned out by the RØKKR fans, I just think it's super cool, and I think that's something that we haven't been able to see yet in the CDL. Right, that was one of the biggest draws to the CDL, is that finally we'll have these home events where teams
Yeah.
of OpTic and teams of London and teams of wherever that tournament is being held can be the resounding squad that gets the most fanfare, and we haven't seen it yet. So even with the first one this year, it just happened to be OpTic's home major, so we didn't really quite see it there either. So the
Yeah.
first one outside of where OpTic is the fan favorite, it was just cool to see the experience overall. It was cool to see other players get love that in the past they probably haven't really gotten before. I know that was something that I talked about when the CDL formed, is that, and that was before COVID and before everything went online. But I just thought it would be cool that, if you weren't on OpTic, you really weren't getting that level of love from the fans in attendance.
Yeah. Of
So now I
course.
think it's super cool, whether it's in Minnesota or wherever, the following majors are going to be. I just think it's cool that those players are going to get to experience that sort of love from the fans. So overall, I think the event was phenomenal. It was really cool
Yeah.
to see different teams make it. Like, if you had to talk, and I know we'll talk more about this in a minute, but
Oh yeah. Of course.
when it comes to predictions and who was going to win what, I mean, I was all over the place. For right now, I don't feel like I know who's in the top four, who's in the top six, whatever. But the event was super cool to watch.
Yeah, it was amazing. And, something you kind of hinted at is an old school term that we don't use that much anymore, but it's the optic juice. It's a real thing. There's players that become, I mean, it happened to Envoy when he got on optic. It happened to Dashy when he got on optic. It happened to Formal when he got on optic. And it's really kind of like the Nade Shot and Scumpy, and Hex. They just have shared their influence with people. And it's amazing. I mean, Midnight, me. I mean, I a lot of my notoriety in this community back in the day was because of OpTic juice, and so it's amazing that an event happened and OpTic didn't have all their juice. I mean, they
Yeah.
actually were getting booed at moments, and so like OpTic getting booed is that's what planet are we on? And
Yeah.
so like seeing that happen and seeing the impact it had, I know I talked about it on previous shows, but I actually thought that the OpTic crowd had an impact on FaZe and an impact on OpTic, a negative impact on FaZe, a positive impact on OpTic.
Yeah.
I wonder if without as much juice, it impacted OpTic in this event, And I know they got through the RØKKR, but of course, it's not like the RØKKR fans are going to go crazy wanting them to win. It's like they're the team to beat your team. It's like, in football and stuff, when you lose the Super Bowl, the team that beat you, they're the enemy, And so, like, this was a really interesting event, and it really showed that home crowds, to your point, like, they matter. Like, I would love to see an Atlanta event, for Atlanta
Yeah.
FaZe and see what that would if OpTic would get booed in that environment and what that would, because I think those FaZe guys need it. I mean, if I'm honest with you, they have become the villains, and now that LAN is back and you're getting booed and you're the best team in the game, like it's kind of obvious if you look at their placings over the last 18 events, 14 grand finals, like that's ridiculous. And
Yeah.
so it's got to hurt to be booed in that environment. And so awesome, tippable to the RØKKR, because what they did is they grew a fan base over time, and everybody that's in this chat and everybody that watches this content and that follows the Twitter and what their players do, what Attach is doing on his channel. I saw that he's interviewing Slasher tomorrow. You guys should check that out. Like, honestly, this event was amazing. It was a really awesome event, very unpredictable. So the viewership leveled off a bit lower than usual, but I don't take any negatives away from this event. As a COD fan, I was really happy. So, there's a part of that event that was unfortunate for the home team, and we knew it was possible. It was really hard. They were going to go against the Seattle Surge or OpTic Texas, and the hope, from my standpoint, was that Seattle got beat by OpTic and they were kind of beaten down, and they could then get beat by Minnesota. Not that Minnesota can't beat either one of those teams, but those two teams have been at the top and competing at the highest level in this league, and it didn't seem like RØKKR found their full footing yet. And so I kind of, I want to talk a little bit about the state of the Minnesota RØKKR, and without Ashley here, like we're not going to get the purple Kool-Aid, so to speak, but what are your overall thoughts on how the RØKKR placed and played in this event, and what do you think the state of things are for the Minnesota RØKKR right now?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a tough stretch here. I mean, I don't think there's any point in sugarcoating anything. If you look at kind of how the online qualifiers ended, all they had to do was beat an NYSL squad that had a roster change and was kind of new to their environment and their chemistry and what they were trying to do as a squad. And they weren't able to do that. And it didn't even go map 5. They lost 3-1 in that last online qualifier.
Good point.
And had they won that, they would have been placed in winner's bracket. And at least we would have been able to see them a little bit more at their home major. So that was, a little bit confusing. I know NYSL they didn't have the greatest of appearances at this major either. Granted, in the first round, they played Atlanta, and then they got knocked out by LA Thieves.
Right.
But I don't know. It's to a point where I guess I'm expecting, if they're not playing the Atlantas, or I guess you could throw LAG in there now, even though I'm not totally sold. And when it comes to the
I want to talk about that
and whatnot, I don't know how confident I am in them and where exactly to put them. But if it's not like the OpTics or the Atlantas, or maybe even like the Londons and the LAGs, if they're not playing those guys, I'm at a point where I still just think that they're a better squad than the Floridas and the Seattles and the NYSLs and the Paris and those guys. I feel like they should be winning those matches, and we're to a point where they're not winning those matches. And if it's not SND, there's really not a lot of success in either of those other game modes, right? Right now, in Hardpoint for the year, there's 6 wins and 17 losses. And when you think back to last season, when RØKKR was able to turn things around, they were able to do so because they made the roster move to bring in Standy, and they finally started to win some hard points, and they started to win some map 1s. And when you coupled with that, with the fact that they were such a good S&D and control team last year, that you win a map 1 or you win a map 4, and now you're winning, series 3-0, and it's how they were able to make that run in the stage 5 major. And this year they just don't have it. Like, they're decent at S&D. They have an 11-7 record so far in S&D, but their control they haven't been able to lean on. And that was ultimately the difference maker in that series with OpTic. OpTic is the single best control team in the CDL. So in that matchup, you had to win the map 1 hard point. That really wasn't close at all. And if you didn't do that, then you had to win the control because you weren't going to beat them in hard point. So when OpTic is the best control team in the game, it was just such a difficult path to victory. And
Yeah.
some of the mistakes that RØKKR are making, we'll talk about it here in this the segment coming up here. But the
Yeah.
mistakes that they're making are mistakes that players of the caliber that's on this Minnesota RØKKR squad shouldn't be making. And it's to a point where I'm not quite sure, where we go moving forward.
I mean, I know where we go. It's not something anybody wants to talk about, but it is the long break before the next split, so to speak, before the next qualifiers. And everybody's been talking about it. It's obvious there are a number of teams that we can name, like NYSL, like Paris, and you'd have to put the Minnesota RØKKR in that conversation. We're halfway through the season, and right now the Minnesota RØKKR are in the bottom 4, which wouldn't qualify for champs. And we know Attach, we know Brian Saint, we know Looney, we know the entire RØKKR organization. They are building a franchise and they want to win. The whole RØKKR reverse that everybody will be talking about for the rest of COD history that'll go down in the record books as something that will probably never happen. Everybody thought it might. FaZe almost could have done something, but it's honestly, I don't see that happening ever again. This team has shown a resolve. They tried to stick this out for half of the year, and I think now it's time to at least have a conversation. And I don't know. I'm not going to point fingers at players because the hard thing about this team is everybody brings something very valuable to the team, and they have an ice together that seems to work, except they can't seem to find it when they're going against some of the best teams in the game. And there are other teams in this league right now that are struggling with the same thing. I mean, the Boston Breach, everybody keeps talking about their route has been really easy to their success. And yeah, if you look at their placings versus the top 2 or 3 teams, they're on the struggle bus. And so, but as long as you qualify for champs, that's what everybody's worried about right now. That's the second half of this season. We're about to go into the second leg of the season, and everyone's going to be focused on qualifying for champs. I think every team, with the exception of the Paris Legion, probably can qualify. I also know that in about 2 or 3 matches, FaZe is going to basically confirm their ticket. Right now, technically, if they lost everything, the Toronto Ultra could still catch them in points if they won everything. And so I think we're going to get to a place where it's like for sure that some of these teams are getting into champs. And the Minnesota RØKKR right now, it's interesting though because they've lost as many matches as the Boston Breach, who are in 4th. They've only lost 8. Everybody else around them is like 9 losses, 11 losses, 10 losses, 9, 9, 9. And it's because they haven't been able to get far in the majors, and so
Yep.
have to start in the winners bracket in the next major, and need to get basically like to where OpTic got in this current one, to like round 3. So you can see we got the point standings up, and I was talking about it, and it's just I was asking earlier before we started the show, like, what's the HQ like, and everybody's focused on getting their stuff done. I mean, they had a big weekend. This was a huge weekend for Minnesota RØKKR, and I guess that's the thing that you can celebrate is that this is some of the best hosting we've seen. They had a trophy in the CDL. Like, they made an actual trophy,
Which was dope.
so that was awesome. It was really great. And I saw lots of good sentiment from the players, even though they had lost. Mostly Attached, but it's like I saw good sentiment, people they were meeting at the event. And so Attached, Dylan is still going around the venue and talking to all of those fans who came out to see them win. And even though they didn't win, it was like, let's still engage with our fan base, with these people who stand behind us. And so, to your point, I don't know the path forward. I do not think from a analytical standpoint, they should stick, because it's just like, let's find out what's not working, and the only way to find out is to make a change. So That would be my state of the Minnesota RØKKR. But to talk a little bit about something at this event, I'm going to hand it over to you, Icon, for your by the numbers segment.
Yeah, so as I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about today, most of the time I'm talking about like how defensive rounds and control are going, or what makes a team so good at hardpoint, and how good they are on certain hills, on different maps, stuff like that. But with this, it really hit me when I was watching that OpTic versus RØKKR match. The very first map, I just kind of got this sense that overall RØKKR didn't seem very prepared. And when you're playing against a team like OpTic, now, I know OpTic is one of the best respawn teams in the game. Shotzzy individually is one of the best players in the entire world. So when you're playing a squad like that and a player like that, they definitely have the ability to just pop off and they can beat you by themselves. I mean, it's just, we saw it from Standy last year. We saw it from Abizi. We've seen it from Shotzzy. We've seen it from these super talented players in the past. But it wasn't even in this first hard point that Shotzzy popped off. It was just the routes he was taking. So, for example, I just kind of, as I was watching, I took a little snippet of what was happening on this Gavutu hardpoint. And this is when the score early on in the first set of rotations, as it was going from P4 to P5, what you're seeing here is that as OpTic has control of the left-hand side of the map inside of P4, you can see all of those white arrows inside that P4 hardpoint. And if you don't have P4, you have to try to get time inside of P5, because the way that this hardpoint works out is P1 and P2, which are right in the center of the map, are pretty contested. P4 and P5 are those hills where if you're down by 40, you can pop off, you can get a bunch of points, you can get right back into the game. Or if you're up by 40, then you can build on top of that and you can really put this away. So what you're looking at here is, okay, you don't have time inside of P4. You have to go ahead and you have to lock down the right-hand side of the map as it's about to pop towards P5. And that white arrow on the right-hand side of the mini-map, number 7, that is Shotzzy. And he was just able to leak out. He was able to get all the way on that right-hand side of the map. And as it rotated over towards P5, that's where this map started to get away from Minnesota, is just they weren't able to hold down those spawns on the right-hand side of the map. They weren't able to get 30, 40, 50 points inside of P5. And what you see from a lot of squads, like, for example, Atlanta FaZe is really good on this map, is that they almost treat this as if you're inside of P4. So if Atlanta isn't inside of P4, they almost set up a spawn trap, and they don't even let you get near mid-map to get over to the right-hand side of the map for P5. And that's not the setup that you see here, right? You have one player from Minnesota watching the push over on the top side of the map, which is great. I mean, obviously you don't want to give up the flank there, but if you just hold, as Atlanta is exiting that P4 hill, if you just hold down those couple choke points from there, then you don't have to worry about somebody like Shotzzy escaping. But if you look at the middle of the map here, it is so wide open. And when you have a player like Shotzzy that is so sneaky and his movement is the best in the world, you're going to be able to see this. So this is just the first example in the first set of hardpoints as this really started to spiral away from us. Now, this was a little bit later, so now it's going over towards P3. We talked about how P1 and P2 can be super contested. So 3, 4, and 5, you kind of have to go from there. And again, what you're seeing here is that as you go towards P3, you want to have that right-hand side of the map. You can see that right now, Minnesota is set up. They're inside the current P3 hardpoint, and it's a little bit difficult to see, but in the bottom right, you can see the purple arrow that has number 2 next to it, but right underneath it, you can see that white number 7 arrow. That, again, is Shotzzy. And I specifically paused it right here because Shotzzy is behind that player as we're looking at it right now, and he doesn't actually shoot this player. He just gives it up, and he goes to the right-hand side of the map, and he goes to set up for contesting those spawns. And it's just another example of, okay, we're set up, we have map positioning, we have spawns. All we have to do is just lock down the middle of the map and not allow Atlanta to get to that, or OpTic to get to that right-hand side of the map. And Shotzzy was able to do that. And this is just another example of where, okay, if we're down by 40 or 60 or whatever, we could take control of this hardpoint. We can get us back in the game. And there's just open routes that allows a player like Shotzzy to get through and disrupt this side of the map. And then we have one more here, and this is towards the very end. So I believe as we're looking at it right now, OpTic is at like 248, so they're just a couple seconds away. So this one might be a little bit different, but still, you're going over towards P5 on the bottom right-hand side of the map, and now what do you notice? Right? Look at the top side of the map. Look at what's happening. Even if Minnesota is able to lock this down and get the entirety of this time, they would be able to get it close. They're not going to win. So I get the fact that, okay, we have to focus towards that hard point, but you're looking at the top right-hand side of the map, and it's going to be impossible because what was locked down before on this rotation from P4 to P5 was that top-hand side of the map, and now Shotzzy sneaks through, and he's going to be able to shoot them in the back again. So as I was watching this live, I was seeing this unfold, and I believe the casters were even talking about the scenarios as they were playing out, but it just seemed like over and over again, there were open lanes that allowed players like Shotzzy's and fast SMGs to get behind enemy lines. And as soon as you mess up spawns and you make things a bit dicey, now you're not getting that time inside the hill. You get flipped out, and this is how you end up losing by, I forget exactly what's the map one. It was 250 to 144. So if you're able to just not even do anything else, but just hold down spawns for these hills and these rotations that you initially have spawns for, that's going to end up leading to a map victory. So it's difficult. He did hit those long routes, but he's just a sneaky player, and I don't know if we were super prepared to lock down all those exit routes, and this is what happens against some of these best teams in the world.
Man, good breakdown. It's funny because something, like when I watch, I'm always paying attention to like the gameplay and what's happening on top of the screen. I look at the minimap sometimes, and I always find it interesting. Like I look on Twitter, and then everybody's talking about a specific play. I'm like, oh well,
or a bad
that's
spawn
an
or something.
Unfortunate spawn. Now there was one spawn, I can't remember what it was. There was one spawn during the event where I mean, it was like everybody saw it, and then Merc was like, wait, how did he get back there? And it was like somebody spawned just like behind the other team, and it was so obvious that shouldn't have happened. And so, that's a part of the game, and there is a lot to be learned there in terms of like, I don't know if it's the chemistry. I don't know if it's like the players, because these guys know how to play Call of Duty. Like, they're good in other game modes. They're good in other, maps throughout these matches, but map one seems to be a problem. There's just something. I don't know if they need to listen to some music. I don't know what it is, but and they talked about, like, a lot of teams, what happens in practice doesn't happen on game day. So that means there's something that is happening on game day when they go from being cold to being hot in a game. There's something that needs to change, and it may be one of the players that just has to play a game to get into it, and that one person could be holding them back. I have no idea. But your breakdown really showed that there is a bit of a breakdown, and there's some things that need to be worked on, which I'm sure this team is aware of because they're a great team.
Right.
So thank you for sharing all that. That was dope, Icon. So we have to talk about this event, and we can look at the bracket, and look at what happened to some teams. There's some teams where you just like I was taking notes, before the show and stuff, and then I'm looking at the bracket, and I'm calling out names. I'm going, all right, OpTics or Subliners. And I get down to Rokkr, and I just put a frowny face, like Subliners, frowny face. Like, they got 3-0'd by FaZe, and then, they brought it to game 5. But getting kind of first rounded out of this event for them, that's not success at all. For Crimsix especially, we know that. And there's other teams that they did work. This is, Rambo shouted out before the grand finals even happened. He gave a shout out to Seattle, to Florida, and to Lag, and was like, this is the most competitive that this Call of Duty League has ever been. And that's the reality. Is you look at a team like the Breach, it's like they 3-0'd the team that won the event and threw them into losers. And that's like where they got their inspiration, I guess, to go on their crazy run. They went game 5 with the Mutineers, who went far in the tournament. They lost to FaZe, which so did everybody else except for the Guerrillas. And they went up against the Guerrillas and took it to game 5. And they just struggled in that game 5. But I think that what we saw from a lot of these teams was they tried, And it just, like, the Royal Ravens, they got beaten that first round, but then they beat the Legion, which they should have, and then they lost 3-0 to the team that won the event. And so there's a lot of teams that, in my opinion, should be holding their heads high, like the Mutineers. I would hold my heads high if I was the Mutineers. They lost to the team that won the event. They got pretty far in the tournament. It is obvious if you look at, the Guerrillas path. You lose first round and then win out. And I think they were 20-9 after getting 3-0'd in every map that they played, which is utterly ridiculous, including 5-2ing FaZe. And to go 20-9, they went game 5 in those last 3 to get up to the grand finals. Like, that is just ice after ice after ice. They couldn't lose a search and destroy 10 in a row. And so I kind of want to talk about lag, and I have some questions that I'm curious as to your opinion. And one of the first ones, Icon, is, does this team go back to the team that they were? Does Big P come back? They just won an event, but was it all just non-preparation vibes? Or is Spart the spark that they need, and Big P doesn't come back and he gets put on the trading block?
That is, I guess that's the big question right now, because when you think about, Spart came in, and him using the Volt, it completely changed the entire tournament. Like, we really had not seen that gun whatsoever. He uses it, and then now you just see it on every squad almost. Like, you definitely saw Atlanta FaZe using it in the grand finals. He came in and basically changed the course of that entire tournament just by being successful with a different gun. What I will say is that, especially when you get towards the grand finals, I think he had, obviously, he played out of his mind, tremendous. But when you look at the other players on that squad, Hugh was unbelievable. Hugh was the best player in this tournament overall. Should have won MVP in that grand final. He had like a 1.24, 1.25, which is far better than everybody else. And I think we have to maybe remember that in our minds, because when you go back to the very first major last year, Ook was the best player in Black Ops Cold War before everything else kind of spiraled out of control for him. He was the best player in the CDL last year.
Yeah.
And when this squad was built, that was one of the big questions is, okay, all right, you got Slasher. All right, you got a route man in a scene that played phenomenally in Black Ops Cold War alongside Hydra. Okay, you got Gunless. He's had some rough patches. But what are we going to get out of Ook? That was the big question mark. If you get this Ook tournament in and tournament out, okay, now this is a squad that can be a contender no matter if they're playing online or on LAN or whatever. So I know that's, maybe a different tangent, but Slasher played super well, and obviously he was unbelievably motivated. And you could tell with where he was going on Twitter after the event that he kind of had some chips on his shoulder. Asim can play with any route man in the CDL. So
he's ridiculous.
Yeah, everybody just turned up. They played unbelievably well. I think Spart was instrumental to them winning this, but I don't think he was the sole. I know he won like the finals MVP or whatever, but he was not the sole reason why they won that finals. For me, it was Ook and then Slasher. So I don't really know what they do moving forward. It'll be interesting to see. I don't think Gunless has necessarily been playing bad. I think that you could sub him in. And now I will say I don't think he's the same type of player that Spart is. I think that they approach the game a bit differently. I think that Spart opens up the map a bit more for his teammates. And now all of a sudden, you're not only dealing with the pressure from Asim, but you're also dealing with the pressure from Spart and Ook. So I think that just if you're playing LAG, now you have one more thing to worry about and you're back on your heels a little bit more. So I'm not sure what they do moving forward. I think I would let this squad ride out. When you beat London 3-0 and you beat Seattle in a map 5, who has one of, accuracy is named Iceman for a reason. You beat on land Seattle map 5. You beat Florida when Florida looked like, okay, they're winning this elimination round 4. They absolutely threw that last S&D for LAG to even move on and get into the losers bracket finals. So what they were able to do was super impressive. Now, what I will say is that they did have a series of, they had to win in map 5s, right? This was not a super dominant performance where, all right, we're going to 3-0
No,
this squad, 3-0 this squad, 3-1 here. We're in the
it
grand
wasn't Search
finals.
though.
Right. So, and by the way, something that has been a saying in competitive Call of Duty for as long as it's been around is that S&D wins championships, and
Big
these
facts.
dudes were lights out in
Yep.
S&D. So I don't know where LAG goes from here. I think that they're definitely in the top, I don't know, maybe top 4 teams. I mean, the talent is there. There's still the question marks for me. Do you get that out of Hook every tournament? Do you get that out of Slasher every tournament? But this
So
was not a resounding, beatdown of Florida and Boston to get to where they were.
no, but this team beat the Ultra Ravens, Surge, Mutineers, Breach, and then 5-2 FaZe. The only team they didn't beat of any notoriety is OpTic. They beat teams that beat OpTic. Like in my opinion, this is one of the most impressive wins that I've seen. It took Slasher 1,000 days to get another W. Hook hasn't won since 2020. And ASIM's been fighting for a championship on different franchises. And he gave a shout out to those franchises. He gave a shout out to his coaches from NYSL and from the Minnesota Rokkr. Like he gave a shout out to people. And I think that I think Spart was the spark though. And I think to your point, I think you let it ride. It's really hard to think about changing this because if he was the one that think about it, who else on this team is going to shout with a scene? Nobody. These are all laid back dudes.
Yeah.
You put Spark in there and you saw him getting all riled up and being the only other person who was doing that on the entire team is a scene. Like that is not Slasher was clapping when he won the champion. He's literally clapping. Like he wasn't being like, let's go. He was like, and you saw a scene like telling the crowd to get up and Hook is just like giving his Hook smile.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, we did it, guys. Like high five. And so like, honestly, I think the juice they need, like it's something that Clayster has. I think he might have that. I think Spart might have that Clayster juice where he just gasses up his teammates in a way that works. And team dynamic, it's now becoming one of the more important aspects of winning because everybody's so equal in terms of skill. And you have coaching teams across the entire league. If you can get the right mix of players, and that's what when we talk about the Minnesota Rokkr, it's not like any of their players are bad. It's just the mix isn't working. So you may need to look at switching the mix around. The New York Subliners, none of the players are bad, Krim included. It's just the mix is not working. It definitely wasn't working with Clayster, but I still think it's not working. Then you have teams like the Boston Breach, where if you looked preseason, you'd have them in the bottom 4 of the league based on, and I'm not saying anything against any of those players, but that's just where you'd predict them. And then Big Cap comes in and goes off. Those players feed off each other. Nero, TJ, Methods, they feed off each other. I think this team showed us that. And I wouldn't break it up. If it was me, I'm putting Big P on the market. I'm giving him an opportunity to go somewhere else. And that's a good call out from Oliver Lee in the chat. Spart and Asim are killer together. That's facts. They are. They make a good duo. And then you have this veteran in Slasher who's not going to make a lot of mistakes on the map. And you have Hook who has Gunny like Shotzi. Like, I think, man, everything you said, Icon, even it just more so. I already was on par with not changing this, but more so I wouldn't. And it's the right time. There's going to be a lot of team shopping right now. And there's a wild Clayster out there trying to get on a team. There's lots of players that are now like, I want to get back in because they know these franchises are going to probably pick some people up. Paris could drop 2 or 3 people. Who knows? They're going to keep Donnie, I'm sure. So was there any other surprises that, was there any other placements that you were actually surprised by outside of lag beating a lot of teams, but were you surprised by anybody, how good they did or how bad they did in this tournament?
I don't know if I could say that I'm super surprised just because of the fact that when I look at, like, it seemed like last year you could almost divide the CDL into like the top 4 that were always contenders, a middle 4 that were like, okay, we're kind of so on them, and then you had the bottom 4 squads, the Paris, the Londons, the Seattles of the world that they just weren't going to compete. This year, I feel like Paris is down there, but other than that, and the predictions kind of show that. The way that the predictions for us wound out is that I just don't know what to expect from a lot of these squads match
Yeah.
in and match out. Um, I still, and I don't know what it is. I know that I talked about this a little bit with like, some people texting back and forth or whatnot. This might be the tournament that kind of breaks my Atlanta FaZe resolve, because
Oh,
from the beginning of when the CDL formed, I just saw, all right, you got Celium, you got Simp, you got a Beezy. Good luck beating these guys no matter who they play. And that has always been my stance all the way throughout. And I still think that if you play 10 matches, FaZe versus 10 matches versus anybody, FaZe is probably going to win out of 10 against,
7 for
Florida.
sure.
Or,
Yeah.
I mean, they're still
Yes.
the best squad, but they're just not showing up in this game in those key moments like they have done in years past. But outside of like OpTic, just because they're much improved in S&D and they're so good at control, outside of OpTic and Atlanta, after that, I mean, London was in that conversation for me. And then the only thing they did this tournament was beat Paris, and then they got smoked by LAG, which a lot of teams did. But now I'm not quite sure on London. Boston had a really good showing. LA Thieves, I mean, there's a ton of people thinking, like, does LA Thieves make a roster change? Like, are they to that point when, yeah, they beat NYSL. They took OpTic to map 5 before losing an S&D to OpTic, which obviously has a huge clutch factor when it comes to that OpTic squad. It's just to the point where, like, I have so many question marks. Florida, before this tournament, I guess I'd probably have them in like the bottom 4. Not quite sure how the roster was made up. It didn't quite fit a bunch of roles. You had Awakening last year running Flex. Now this year he's running SMG, and he's been playing super well. I mean, he's probably a top 5 player in the CDL, which has a lot to do with their success. Dave Patty has been absolutely shredding. But even with them, I still have question marks. Like, yeah, they got an impressive win over OpTic, but they lost to Boston. They lost to LAG. It just seems like when you're looking at the landscape of the CDL right now, I don't know who's going to win on a night in, night out basis. And one final thing I'll say about LAG is that, and I know I might have been kind of tough on them, is I don't think Gunless deserves to lose his spot. I just think that the makeup of that LAG squad is better as it's made up right now. Yep. I think Gunless has been playing super well. I think he's probably a top 10 or 15 player in this game. I think if you take him and you put him on Paris or somebody like that, maybe even like NYSL, who needs a different piece, I feel like he needs to have a home in the CDL.
Yeah.
It's just, they brought in a player that fits better alongside a seam and brings some different stuff to the table. So it's not that, Gunless deserves. I didn't want to make it sound like that. It's just, I think that the way that the team is made up, it's just made up better as it is now.
So if I was going to quick run through here, so that we can, kind of talk about standings and everything, but we kind of talked about that a little bit. Lag proved that they're probably going to be one of those teams that will fight for a champ spot. Atlanta FaZe, I'm going to switch back because I was going to go according to the list of the placements, but I'll go according to this list. So FaZe proved that they're still the best team. And me and you talked on our old show, like when this team first kind of formed, and you were like, this could be the best team in the game for the next 3 to 5 years. There's not
definitely
like
use the term dynasty.
Yes, for sure. And it's hard to not call them a dynasty with 14 out of 18 finals, but it's like people that hate on LeBron because he's been to 10 championships, but has lost more than he's won. It's like, I understand that people are not satisfied with second place. I understand that FaZe is not satisfied with second place. Scump is the same type of player, and Krim is the same type of player. That's what champions do. They don't like anything other than winning championships. And for FaZe, this is a fail. Like 2 second place in a row. This is not what they want. Yeah, they're going to champs. Cool. But Crowder is not the same as Rambo. Like, yeah, I don't care. Just as long as we win champs, Now, if you win champs, then yeah, you look back and you're like, well, I guess all those second places were worth it, you know. But you want to win within the season to be more and more intimidating. Like you just want that swagger. Like you can't beat us. You know, we're gonna win the majority of the events, and that's already impossible. They can win half, and so with it when it comes to OpTic, still a good team, still a great team. You look at their freaking series win loss, they're phenomenal. I think they're gonna still be in a slugfest with FaZe throughout the year. Royal Ravens, I didn't learn anything negative about them. They played hard. They didn't play their best. Boston Breach, verdict is still out after 2 entire majors. I still have no idea what to think of the Boston Breach. And I know they're probably going to make champs. I know they're a top 16 guaranteed. I don't know anything else. Could they place 8th, 9th? Sure. It's possible depending on who they go against.
There was something in the chat from Just Polar TV about
Mhm.
Breach, and he said Breach is going to be a team that is going to keep getting better. And I personally, I don't know if I agree with that.
Yeah.
Just the makeup of that squad, I feel like Boston, I feel like they're close to their ceiling. I think so when I look at like how good can a squad be,
Yeah.
is their ceiling still much higher than what they've shown? Methods right now has been unbelievable. I mean, he's been the star of that squad. Yes, Capsule's been playing amazing, but what Methods has given to that squad is what has fueled them so far this year. And I'm just not quite sure. Like, I feel like that's as good as he's going to play. And when you look at TJ and Nero and Capsule, I just feel like maybe they know the game a bit better than everybody else right now. What they're doing in S&D, I mean, they're a squad that's really good at S&D. So I don't know. I feel like when I look at Boston personally, I think that they're approaching their ceiling, not that they're still really far away from the best version of themselves that they can be.
Breach is a momentum team, I think, says Will in the chat. When they are up, they dominate, but if they hit a wall, they fall apart. I agree. I think they don't stop playing, though. That's what's weird about them. They might stop their teamwork, but they don't stop. Like, Capsule, I don't think is ever going to, like, not try to fry, and just sometimes when you run into a wall, whether it's a green wall or a phase wall or whatever it is that you're running into, a purple wall from lag, you might you need to slow down. You got to stick to your fundamentals, and that's what a lot of these teams that are winning, speaking of teams that we thought were going to be winning coming into this year but have done a very horrible job of it. What are your thoughts on the Toronto Ultra, Icon?
I don't know. I'm completely speechless. This is another one of those squads that throughout MW, throughout Black Ops Cold War, even as this year started, I was like, okay, there's the Atlanta FaZe, and the Toronto Ultra is consistently the second best squad over the last couple of years in the CDL. And you look at their makeup this year, and we talked about this a little bit with Looney last year, is that they might not, or last week or 2 weeks ago when we had our podcast with Looney, and I asked him about Toronto, and he said that it might just be a situation where last year those guns that were in Black Ops Cold War, especially Cammy was a top Krig player in the CDL last year. And the way that the automaton works this year, it's a little bit of a different style of a weapon. You have to almost post up a bit more. And I think that I'm starting to believe that this might be a game that just doesn't suit them, because when you look at where they're at, RØKKR has been putrid in hardpoint, and Toronto's been worse. Toronto is the 12th ranked team in hardpoint this year. And when you think at what they've done, what their track record is over the last 2 years, that is not the same Ultra that we've seen.
Nope.
When you look at S&D, they're still performing in S&D. They're the third best team in S&D, and then Control, they're up there as well. It's just their hard point has consistently failed them over and over again. And if you lose both of your hard points, we're seeing that with Minnesota RØKKR. It's such a tough path to overcome that a lot of squads can't do it. And I think with this one, they ran into an LAG squad that obviously was just off the charts at this tournament. I mean, we've seen that from squads in the past, namely Minnesota RØKKR last year at the Stage 5 Major. So I don't know. I honestly, I still think, like, if you look at the standings overall, you see Toronto mixed in with the Floridas and the Seattles and the LA Thieves of the world. I still think that they're a better squad. I just think that they haven't found their way yet. Like, to me, I look at these CDL points and these standings overall, I could definitely see at the end of the third major, Toronto being 20, 30 points ahead of Florida and Seattle and LA Thieves. Like, for me, I just don't see them staying beneath some of the squads that they're beneath right now. And maybe it's just I have that same resolve with Toronto that I have with Atlanta. Is I still think that FaZe is the best squad in the game, even though it may be teetering a little bit. I still think that Toronto is a better squad than what they're showing this year. It just hasn't come to fruition yet. And I guess maybe you could say the same thing about Minnesota. They're very similar, that when their hard point clicks, okay, we're going to start to see much better performances. It just hasn't yet, and it's something that I personally can't explain.
Um, Aches said at the beginning of the year before anything was played that the Toronto Ultra were going to be the CDL champions, and he still keeps saying that. And I'm going to take another one of his phrases and say it might be time to blow it up. I think I think honestly, this is the how every year there's like a reward or whatever you call it for like most improved player, most improved team,
Mm-hmm.
most whatever, like in the NBA and stuff like that. Like they get these most improved awards. When you're on little league teams as a kid, they give you a most improved award. You got so good over the summer, and it's like the Ultra did the opposite, man. It was like
Yeah,
it's not even a least improved. It's like most declined. Like they have become a walking L instead of a walking W. And I don't mean any disrespect by that, but it's like it's hard to predict them to win anymore.
I
Like
know.
to your point, it's hard to predict FaZe not to win. Even in the next tournament, everybody's gonna say FaZe gonna win. Like there wasn't a single person on the timeline the moment the grand finals. They were like, "Good job, lag. You did a good run, but you're about to run into FaZe. They've been waiting for you, and they're getting this chip." And it was like, "Oh, snap! We were all wrong." And I think with the Ultra, I just don't see it, man. I agree with you. I think it might take a roster change to change it, but I agree with you that they won't be where they are. But they could not make champs. And I don't know if they need to go to challengers. I don't know if they grab Spart if he doesn't get a squad. I don't know if they grab a Clayster. I don't know what the piece is, because those guys have a chemistry, much like the RØKKR team. Those guys have a chemistry that has lasted years now. And so it's kind of like, wait, do we really want to break up this chemistry? Because what if this chemistry works at champs? It's just not working right now. Like who knows? They all got sick. They, went through COVID. Each player went through COVID, but not at the same time. It's like, you get it for 2 weeks, then I'm going to get it for 2 weeks, then I'm going to get it for 2 weeks, then I'm going to get it for 2 weeks. So for 6 weeks or 2 months straight, they have COVID and can't play their best. And so I feel for the team. But it's really hard to, they have a good academy team they can pull from. That's a good point. Their academy team was pretty good. I saw footage of one of them cussing and yelling at the other team a lot. I think his name was like Scrappy or something like that. I was like, all right, there goes that passion pit. Yeah, gotta throw that passion. But I mean, Asim was yelling across the stage, like, sometimes the passion just comes out. And so I think with this Ultra team, like there's something missing. It's not the same team we saw last year. It feels like the team that we saw before Insight came in, which is really interesting. And so hopefully it's just the sickness, because I'll tell you, it was fun watching these guys compete. Like
Mm-hmm.
they had a drive and a teamwork that no one could touch, not even FaZe. Everybody was like, that's the best teamwork in the game. FaZe has the best skill in the game, but the best teamwork in the game is the Toronto Ultra. If you want to learn how to play and use teamwork, watch them. Like
1,000%.
they were the best. And so I'm really interested to see what happens with this team and where they go and all of that kind of stuff. Like overall, I actually wasn't the only thing that was surprising was the finals. Like if I'm honest, that was the biggest surprise of this event. I wasn't really like flabbergasted by the way anything else worked out. And if the Breach would have went to the finals instead of the Guerrillas, it would have been like expected because of the way the Breach were playing. The Guerrillas just like they bullied their way into winning this event. They just bullied. They were like, we're not losing a search. So you can play us 5 maps if you want. We're still going to beat you. And they just did that over and over and over, and then did the same thing in the grand finals, like 10 in a row. And it's the streak lives on, right? Like we don't know how long they're going to go. But they broke FaZe's record by beating FaZe. So GG's, big ups to that entire team organization, to Slasher. I know every time we've seen like Clayster win after 1,400 days or whatever it was. We saw Aches win after 3 or 4 years. We like anytime one of these veterans gets a W, even seeing Seth win the last event, like seeing these veterans get a W after it's been a long wait, like you're just happy for him. When Attach won last year, same thing. And so just GG's to Austin. I know this meant something because right before this event, when Gunless was down, he was just like, wow, I just can't win. Everybody tells me to try my best. And look at this. Look what happens to me. And he tried his best and he won the entire tournament. So GG's Austin and the whole organization and lag. Now we're going to do some questions from our wonderful viewers, from you guys. So I'll wait for the first question to pop up. I think I actually have it. And okay, the first question is, it'll come up on the screen in a moment, from Andrew Larson. And it says 2 questions, if that's okay. How does everyone feel with another purple team taking the trophy? And what is everyone's reaction to lag making that amazing losers bracket run? You can kind of do a abbreviated version since we kind of talked about some of this, but go ahead, Icon. I'll let you go first.
Yep. I mean, purple's my favorite color, so I love it. I mean, backdrop, we got some purple here. Rokkr's purple. I mean, I love purple. When it comes to LAG making the losers bracket, I personally love losers bracket stories. Like when you think back through COD history, you think of what Slasher's done in losers brackets run. I mean, that was like the point that he made, right? Like I'm the champ of the losers bracket. What he did before, and then what he was able to do with 100 Thieves. I mean, I like to see these runs happen. It's like when you're watching the NCAA men's tournament and you see St. Petersburg doing the same sort of thing. Like you're always rooting for that squad to make that run that you don't necessarily expect. So just like what you laid out, it's a great story. I'm not sure that I'm pushing my chips all in on LAG. I think it's a great story, but if you had to tell me like, all right, who's going to place top 4 at the third major? I don't know if I'm going to put LAG in that, in that group, but it was phenomenal to see. And I'm happy for all those players, especially after what they've been through the last couple of years.
Yeah, man. It feels weird. I said this before the show, like seeing Asum on a graphic, with the Minnesota RØKKR being mentioned because he used to play for the RØKKR. Like seeing Asum on that graphic in purple, it's just, and for a split second, my brain thinks it's the RØKKR, and then it's like, no, that's lag, and so I think it's interesting that lag has switched to like the Lakers colors, in the like this major 2 qualifiers and then up into major 2. I wonder what made that decision. I like the purple and white, but it's interesting that now it's the purple and gold or yellow or whatever color that is. It's interesting that they went like the Lakers kind of color scheme, and it's kind of cool though because it's LA, right?
It sets them different from everybody else too.
Yeah. I mean, the other LA team is red and black, so there's not even but it does set them apart from like Toronto. When those two play each other, it's kind of like, wait, which team? And so the purple and gold or purple and canary, I don't know what that color is, but it's fine that they took the trophy. And then the losers bracket run, honestly, I love the sentiment I saw on the timeline. I've never seen other pros happier for another team winning than this tournament. Like, yeah, everybody tipped the RØKKR when they did the reverse, right? Like, everybody was just like flabbergasted by that. And I think, I hate to say this, I think if the RØKKR would have beaten FaZe in that tournament instead of Toronto, it would have been the same sentiment. I think people literally have accepted that FaZe is the villains and nobody wants them to win anymore, which is interesting. They're the big bad guys, like that just win a lot and nobody wants them to win anymore. Like when Michael Jordan was three-peating, the rest of the NBA was like, screw you, dude, you suck. And so that losers bracket run, though, I saw Scump, Rambo. I mean, I don't even want to name people. I saw so many people. That is beautiful, that trophy. I saw so many people shouting them out on the timeline and just saying that is the most tippable performance. I think Sam Octane said that is the most tippable performance I've ever seen. Like, and so GG's to those guys, man. That run was ridiculous. All right, let's move to our second question. It's from Sabrina, and she says, did you expect the RØKKR fans to be able to silence the Greenwall fans as well as we were able to, despite OpTic winning? Number one, shout out to Sabrina for being a RØKKR fan. She said we were able to. GG's, Sabrina and the RØKKR fans. for silencing the Greenwall fans. I don't think they were ready for that. And GG's to you guys. No, I didn't expect it. Hector said at the beginning of last season, I think when it was the Huntsman, or no, it was the beginning of this season. I remember Hector saying, like, no matter where OpTic goes, we're gonna have the biggest fan. Like, we're gonna get the most noise. But the Minnesota RØKKR proved that's not true. Like, you can actually build a fan base from the ground up. This isn't FaZe or Envy. This is the Minnesota RØKKR who came in with the CDL, have built a fan base that's silencing OpTic. Something to be proud of. So GG's to you, Sabrina, and the rest of the RØKKR fans. Any thoughts there, Icon?
Yeah, just like I mentioned in the open, is that I was listening to like the chants, and when it was S&D and the rounds were getting super tense and stressful, and you'd start to hear like the "Let's go OpTics," just the classic chant that you hear that follows OpTic no matter where they go. And it became a point where like you couldn't quite distinguish if they were saying OpTic or RØKKR, and then the more you listen, kind of got drowned out by the "Let's go RØKKRs." So yeah, it's cool to see, and I hope that we continue to see this. I believe the next tournament's in Toronto, so it'll be cool to see if the Toronto fan base shows up. And I think the last one, I remember looking it up, the last one's the New York Subliners home series. So it's just cool to that this is going to travel around, and we'll get to see what those fan bases look like.
Yeah, shout out to RØKKR, and good luck to those Toronto fans. I think they will show up, but it'll be interesting because they haven't been winning, so it's like harder to build a fan base, around that. And our last question today comes from Pico Soda, and that question is: would making control to give plus 20 seconds per tick, like in Cold War, help balance and make it more competitive? I'll go real quick because I probably have less of an opinion on this than you do, Icon. I happen to like control in this game. I don't play competitively probably as much as Icon does, so I'm not gonna have the same opinion. But as a viewer, as someone who's watching it, I get it, I understand it. Like having an A and a B and it being about ticks, and then watching the lives, like, so happy the life counter is on there. When they didn't have that, that was crazy. But it's like, I really like the way control works in this game, and it's entertaining. I know where people need to rotate. I can look at the mini map, and I can tell what's happening. I know I've learned the call outs really quick just by watching. And so for me, if Icon says it's going to be more balanced and competitive, then I'm like, GG's. But I'm not a person that says get rid of the Volk because a new guy came in and changed the meta mid-tournament and beat all of us. Like, I'm not down for that. So,
Yeah, I don't know. I think the teams that are good at control are going to be good at control no matter what. I will say that I think the differentiation between who gets defense in round 5 that changed from, kill count to tick count, I think that's probably the best thing overall that they could have done. I mean, that's how it was last year in Black Ops Cold War. When it comes to plus 20 seconds per tick, if you really think about it, each of those ticks really only gives you like one push as a team. So would that one push, would that one wave really be enough to change the entire landscape for some squads? I'm not quite sure that it would. But to your point, I do like watching control. I don't think it's the best third game mode. And maybe this is just because, we're OGs around here, but I think CTF is the best third game mode. I think watching capture the flag and, the stalemates that happen and being able to see all the intricacies that happen. And it's probably the most fair game mode because you have both sides, stuff like that. So I like watching control. I just to kind of round it up, I don't think that 20 seconds per tick, maybe it would give a team an extra push towards a hill that they haven't captured yet. But I don't think it's going to completely change the landscape. But it is interesting to think about and talk about.
Agreed. Well put. So producer Shannon says she has a special graphic for us to see.
Oh boy. Oh, let's go. Producer Will getting hype. That's awesome.
I thought it was gonna be the prediction points.
That's what I thought. That's why I said, "Oh boy."
Oh, hype for Will in the chat. Oh my gosh. Hey, nice watch, Will. I feel you. I got like this little metal band for mine. I know so many people have this watch, but GG's. That's a nice shirt too. I
That
like
is
that
a dope
that
shirt.
t-shirt. Yeah, I like that t-shirt. That's
I
pretty
got the
dope.
new version 1 shirt, the
Oh, that's
the one that
clean.
they released.
Never done. I like it.
Yeah,
That's
it's pretty
clean,
dope.
man. Yeah, I'm wearing my you know, my land
Major
gear,
hoodie.
my major hoodie for the RØKKR. I like the thing on the back is really dope. Like I'm not gonna stand up and turn around, but the graphic on the back of it is like I like that they went with that like kind of like
Goes with the Norse, Viking,
yeah, like the
Nordic type
Viking. That's what I
feel.
was looking for, like the Viking feel. I like it. One of these days on the show, I'm gonna wear a Viking hat. But um so I honestly, if Ashley was here, I probably would know this. We have like a month-long break before there's more matches. Like in May 13th is when the next qualifiers start for Toronto. So I do not know, and so I'm not gonna say whether or not we're gonna have a show next week. So stay tuned to the RØKKR socials. Make sure you're following the Minnesota RØKKR, and you'll see some clips from the show. But then we'll also let you guys know when the next show is going to be. Before we close out, though, Icon, here's the predictions I'd ask from you, and we can make these quick and painless. 2 teams that are going to stick, 2 teams that are going to make a change. In your
Ooh.
opinion.
I think for this question, let's eliminate the FaZe and the OpTics because they're
Okay.
not going to make a chain. So I am going to go out on a limb. I'm going to say LAG sticks. I know we had a little conversation with that, but I think just what they were able to do and how well Spart has seemed to gel with Asim and some, what he gives to that roster. I'll say LAG sticks. I will also say Florida sticks. I think coming into this tournament, they were up in the air. What they were doing with the
That's a good one.
roster, with moving Awakening around and bringing in Dave Patty, nobody was really quite sure. But here we are. They just had an impressive performance. We're able to knock out OpTic. We're able to have a really good performance against LAG. So I think Florida sticks. I'll say LAG sticks. Maybe a bit of a spicy take, but if there's a team that needs to make a change, I'll say LA Thieves need to make a
Oh, that was
change.
going to be my first one.
I think
Dead
when it comes
serious.
to that roster, yes, they're sitting 6th right now in the CDL standings, but that is not what's expected out of that squad when it comes to a nade shot Call of Duty based team. So I don't know what the move is. I when I watch that squad, I can't really pick out who exactly isn't performing up to par, but it's just not working. And when you make a change like what you saw with LAG, the entire momentum and the way that the team is made up can change. And I think that's what LA Thieves needs. And the last one that I'll say makes a change is going to be the Toronto Ultra. I think that they need to get back the confidence that they had last year. I know a lot of people has been screaming for Hixie, and I mean, I guess that's a potential change that they can make. It's something that they've already got on their roster that they've
He played
tried
good
this
when he
year that
came
they
in.
could
Yeah.
just it's something easy that they could do, and maybe it's enough to turn around where that squad is at right now. So I'll say needs to make a change. LA Thieves and Toronto Ultra.
All right, so I'm gonna start with needs to make a change, and I'm intentionally gonna pick a different team than you. But wouldn't it be a
Okay.
crazy world if a Clayster was swapped out for an Octane? All right, so my need to change teams or going to change teams. I think NYSL. I called them NYSW, and that was wrong. That's what the W stood for. Was wrong. Kingdom. Like they were NYSL for this event. I got all excited as they closed out 3-0, and then it was chalk. And so I think they need a change because they're 11th in the league right now, and Crimsix is going champs. So I think if they don't change, he'll be like, send me somewhere else. And so I think NYSL is going to make a change, and I think the Minnesota RØKKR are going to make a change. I think the same thing. They're in 10th place with 50 points. I know you don't want to say that on the podcast of the Minnesota RØKKR. And again, I've said it plenty of times on the show. Love all the players. I think they're great. I think they work together. But like you said about the Toronto Ultra, you think this game is just not their game. This makeup of players, it's not working consistently for this game. It's the same problem the LA Thieves are having. And you just can't risk it, not making champs as this type of an organization. This is, I always tell Ashley, it's amazing the work that she's done and the rest of the team and everybody that works with her. But I think, them designating her as like the head of content early on and seeing what has happened to this team and the fan base they've built, like this is now a staple in the CDL after 2 years. Like an entire brand just was born out of nothing. And so I think a change is what will happen. They've never been afraid to change at the Minnesota RØKKR. Never. You know, to swap out, try the person on the bench, change players. They've never been afraid to change and try to get a W.
Producer Shannon in the chat.
Yes, producer Shannon. This is not intel. I am not a part of the Minnesota RØKKR. I know nothing. All right, and the two teams that are gonna stick, I would say the Seattle Surge. Good event.
Yeah,
you know, they're gonna stick. Both the teams you mentioned, I would say, are gonna stick as well. And so the other one I want to throw out there though is the Boston Breach. I think they're gonna stick as well. Zinni is, I believe, still the #1 KD in the entire CDL, right? Like
he's close.
Okay, I know he was number one before this event.
I think he's top 3. I think Celium and Dashi are still the top 2.
So even if, maybe he was just #1 during Major 2 qualifiers. So
that could
even if he's top 3, like GG's to Zen, who couldn't get picked up last year. You know what I'm saying? Like couldn't get on a freaking roster. And so GG's to Zen, Anthony shares my name. Love the guy. GG's to Tony. Like I'm really happy for him in that roster, and I think that they're gonna stick. So thank you guys for watching the rotation today. Like I said, we may have a show next week, we may not. If something crazy happens roster wise, you know we're gonna pop on and we're gonna be talking about it next week. So make sure you guys stay tuned to the RØKKR socials so that you know when to catch us for the next episode of the rotation. Peace out.